Good morning. This is Helen Carson, your mayor for the town of St. Matthews. And this morning we have on our podcast, Now You Know, we have the pleasure of having our own Miss Kathy Brown, who's our probate judge for the county of Calhoun. And she's going to share with us some tips, I'm sure, and some information on what goes on at the probate judge's office, why it's important to probate, and that kind of thing. And so maybe this information may not be what you may need, but it may be something that someone else does need, and we ask you to share it. As always, we try to bring to you helpful information that will be good for you in your everyday life. And so at this time, we want you to call your attention to Miss Kathy Brown, and we're delighted to have her this morning. We are very excited about this. And so, Miss Brown, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Mayor.
Yes, we consider this a true pleasure.
Well, thank you. And I think it's a great opportunity to educate people about what probate is, because a lot of people don't understand.
They really don't.
Right.
I just had an instance yesterday where a person did call me and wanted to share some things that they were going through as far as probate is concerned, and I did advise her to see her probate person in her respective county where she lives.
Right.
And so, as I always do, but we're going to ask you to just share with us why it's important to probate and what happens in your office and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the probate office has several functions. The primary one, I would say, is to probate people's estates after they've passed away. Of course, we also do drug and alcohol and mental health commitment. We do orders of detention to have people picked up and be evaluated. And we also issue marriage licenses. Those are the three functions of probate court. The probate process of when someone passes away, like I said, that's our biggest, that's the biggest concern. And also, it is one that's not known much, because people think when someone passes away, it automatically goes to their spouse or whoever, but that's not true. The South Carolina has a law that we have to abide by. So I'm going to start out with the definition of probate. Probate is the legal process that takes place after a person's death, in which an estate is administered and assets are distributed according to the decedent's will or state law. So there are two different types of estates. There's the testate, which means that the decedent had a will. Okay. And intestate means they did not have a will. All right. So of course the testate means that it's actually going to a specific person that was named by the decedent. Intestate means it has to go by law. And so that means that if you pass away in South Carolina without a will, 50% of your property goes to your spouse and 50% go to your children. A lot of people don't understand that, and it causes a lot of problems. Yes. But the biggest problem is not probating at all, because a person can't get a clear title on property. Of course, without a clear title, you can't borrow against it, you can't sell it, there's no really specific owner. A lot of times people refer to heirs property, and that's property that's been left generations unprobated. And so when you don't probate, it keeps adding on, because as generations pass that started from the initial person that passed away, it keeps adding on to heirs, which just makes a big
which means of the children, grandchildren, and all of that keeps
great-grandchildren, correct.
Keeps adding on.
That's right.
Over the years. Okay.
So it is vital to probate. It's not mandatory to probate, but if you want to have property that is maintained and have help paying taxes, you've got to do probate. Yes, and another thing is that the law only allows you 10 years to do probate. So
10 years?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's a limitation.
There is a limitation. Okay. After 10 years, it becomes a lot more complicated. You have to go through an attorney. You have to do a determination of heirs, and it's an expense. An expense that you wouldn't have to go through if you had done normal probate. Okay. That being said, there are some fees with probate, if that's something you wanted me to hit on.
Yeah, well, probably you could hit on a little bit about just coming to the probate court. Somebody passes and the family does want to probate. Are there any expenses involved at time for them to?
Yes, and that's what scares people, and that's what people think they're going to have to pay so much they don't want to go through probate. But it actually is very inexpensive as opposed to not probating. Okay. So you have the when you probate an estate, it has to be published in the local newspaper in the county in which you reside, and that's for any creditors. If the decedent had any debts that were unpaid, creditors have 8 months to submit a claim to try to get paid for that unpaid claim.
8 months.
8 months.
Okay.
Yes. So there is the fee for the publication, which is $30 in our county, and it goes into the Calhoun Times Leader. That's our local newspaper.
All right.
Then also during probate, it's several stages of probate. You get appointed as personal administrator. I'm sorry, personal representative.
Okay.
And personal representative is basically like a power of attorney for someone who is deceased. When we appoint you and give you the certificate of appointment, it gives you the authority to handle any banking, anything that, transferring of titles, that sort of thing. It's an 8-month process, so, and there's a lot of checks and balances behind it. We make sure that everything is done properly, but you'll have to do an inventory and appraisement, listing the assets of what the decedent owned. Of course, that's the real estate, vehicles, any CDs or IRAs, 401ks, any checking accounts, savings accounts, anything that the decedent's name was solely in. Now, if it's jointly owned, and this is very important to know that if property is jointly owned, not real estate has to be probated, but any kind of cash assets or vehicles, if they're jointly or with joint tenant with right of survivorship, that avoids probate, and you just goes directly to the person that was jointly owned.
You avoid probate. You don't have to come to probate.
Right.
For that.
Correct.
Or to change ownership.
For those things. Real estate, you very seldom see joint tenant with right of survivorship, but it is something that more attorneys are starting to do, which avoids probate, which is very important. You can make sure you don't have to go through probate prior to,
Okay, to do that.
Right.
Okay. Now, being appointed, that is one thing a lot of families, I'm sure, face, is when you have several children, well, I'll say several children that are concerned, and a parent or whatever is deceased, and someone is going to be named. What is it? Executors of the estate?
Personal representative.
Personal representative.
Term, but executors is the older term.
Now, how does that happen? Do you need an attorney to do that, or can the children just decide who is going to be the person that's going to do that, and they tell it to the probate court? I mean, how does that happen?
Good question. Yes, ma'am. That is something that if you have a cordial family, they will decide on their own, and then they have to sign what is called a renunciation, saying that they renounce their rights to serve, and that they will allow the person they specifically want to. So, no, you don't need an attorney for that.
You don't need an attorney for that.
No, ma'am.
Just do that. Okay.
Sometimes it becomes very contentious if the siblings don't get along, and you might see like one petition, and then another person petitions, and then that's called a formal hearing, and that's when we have to do a formal hearing to hear both sides and determine who would be best to serve in the capacity as personal representative.
But does that occur then if a person were to come in, one child comes in and said, I'm going to petition the court because I'm going to be the personal representative. Then another, maybe they're not on good terms, and another child does come in and say, I'm going to go to the probate judge and I'm going to put my name down as a personal representative.
Right.
Then I guess that causes, that's when you have to make a call as to...
Well, we have to have a hearing to get all heirs in the family together and hear, their testimony of why they think they would be better, or, and we have to check to see if they have a, good background, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Very good. Well, you've answered that. I'm sure a lot of questions that persons are probably having questions about in the past, and if not, it'll probably come up in the future, in somebody's future, I'm sure. That they're going to have to call on not in all cases do they have to call on the probate judge. Things are changing, people are taking other avenues and what have you now, but at some point or other, this is good information for them to have. Now, I heard you mention something about if a person does the marital part.
Yes, ma'am.
If a person does need to, if they're seeking to be married or whatever, your office can provide those services?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, ma'am. It's $45 for a marriage license to apply in Calhoun County, and you would need your driver's license or some sort of photo ID, and we need your social security.
Okay. And there was one more thing you told us that your office does do. I forgot that one point.
The mental health and drug and alcohol commitment.
Yes. Could you give us a little lead out on that?
Sure. A lot of times people have family members that are addicted to drugs and become violent or are harmful to themselves or others, and also with mental health disabilities, there's the same kind of thing. So a lot of people think that probate court has a great role in this, but what we primarily do in this case is you would have to go to your mental health facility location and explain to them that this patient is becoming erratic, they're violent, whatnot. And then they would send us paperwork, which we do an order of detention, which would allow the law enforcement to come and pick up the patient and take them to be evaluated.
I see.
And if they are held because the doctor or whoever examines them thinks that they are a serious threat, then we have a hearing, and the doctor, upon his advice, I would take whether the person needs to be held for a longer extent or do outpatient treatment, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much for this information you provided us with this morning.
Absolutely.
And I know, as I said, it's been helpful. If one thing hasn't been, the other has been. And so you all do a number of things, and I can say you do a good job.
Thank you.
People always say I've always told people when they ask for direction in any of those particular situations to seek your probate judge and speak with her. And I'm sure she can help to give you some direction, some correct direction. And they always come back and say, well, I did, and I got some resolution.
Well, that's good
so
to know.
I'm happy about that, and we thank you for your service.
Well, I
your
certainly
office.
am honored to serve in this capacity, and I thank the citizens of Calhoun County for allowing me to do so. I
Yes.
love the job, and I enjoy
Yes.
my people.
Thank you so much again. And again, to my listening audience, we thank you this morning for listening in to our guest and with the podcast of Now You Know. We will continue to bring you helpful information. Hopefully the next time we'll have someone on another subject that would be of interest to you. But again, thank you again for listening in, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye-bye.